What secret do you know that could destroy someone? Story 1. My coworker has been cheating on her husband. For months, she's been telling her husband that she works overtime on weekends at the office. In reality, those weekends are spent at another man's house. One particular day, she and her husband stopped by the office to drop off a table for an event. Coincidentally, I was there, as I often come in on weekends to catch up on work. Her husband glanced at me curiously when she casually commented, "That's strange. I never see you here on weekends." Clearly, she hadn't expected to be caught in a lie. Recently, I overheard her telling someone that the baby she's expecting isn't her husband's. She seems anxious, and I can't help but wonder if she's worried I might say something. The irony that I'm the only other man in the office who fits the situation isn't lost on me. And yes, I'm nervous too. Story 2. When I was 12, I was diagnosed with transverse myelitis, a condition that left me paralyzed. A reality I've lived with for over 3 decades. But what I never told the doctors or anyone else until I was 19 was that shortly before my symptoms began, I was struck hard in the back by another student. I suspect that blow caused internal trauma, possibly a clot or bruise that triggered everything. I eventually confided in 2 friends far from my hometown. More recently, I've shared the story with a sibling or 2, though I've never revealed the person responsible. The truth is, we're distantly related. That person now leads a fulfilling life complete with love, family, and financial stability. Meanwhile, I feel as though I've been slowly fading. But I made peace with it long ago. We were kids, and I've forgiven him. Still, it's a reminder that the human body is fragile, and sometimes one careless act can change a life forever. Story 3. My aunt was 30 when she married a man 4 decades older than her. He had undergone a vasectomy years before, but she desperately wanted another child. Unbeknownst to her husband, she began seeing a 50-year-old repairman. Eventually, she became pregnant and told her husband it was a miracle. He believed her wholeheartedly. When he passed away a few years later, his obituary proudly listed his miracle child among his adult children. The entire situation felt surreal. Eventually, my aunt moved in with the repairman, but the child, now a young adult, never learned the truth about his real father. What's even more astonishing is that she named the child after the repairman, the exact same name. She assumes I don't know, but my mother once told me the whole story. I often wonder how my cousin would feel if he discovered that the foundation of his identity was built on a fabricated miracle. Story 4. Toward the end of my grandfather's life, he was in constant pain. He was 95, frail and suffering. The doctors allowed him to return home instead of going to hospice, saying it was only a matter of time. One particularly difficult night, my uncle, a skilled surgeon, was called in. He arrived with medication, administered it, and stayed to pray with my grandmother and a few others. Moments after the prayer ended, my grandfather stopped breathing. The family saw it as a divine moment, God calling him home during a prayer. But I'm not religious, and I understood exactly what had happened. My uncle had likely given him a dose of painkillers strong enough to bring peaceful sleep that never ended. I believe he timed the prayer to align with the moment of passing. It was done with care, compassion, and intent. And while no one else may ever suspect a thing, I know the truth behind that peaceful farewell. Story 5. Back in middle school, my best friend's mother gave birth to a baby who looked noticeably different from the rest of the family. While everyone in the household was white, the baby had distinct features that resembled someone of Apache heritage. The mother brushed it off with a light-hearted comment about long-lost native ancestry. The father either didn't notice or chose not to question it. Later, while helping fix a school bus driver's computer, a friend and I saw a photo on his desk. The same baby, unmistakably. The resemblance between the child and the driver was undeniable. He looked exactly like the baby's father. We never told a soul, but from that day on, we both knew who the real father was. And the mother's light-hearted explanation? Just a convenient cover. Story 6. At one point in my career, I was paid by management to read and report on coworkers' emails. Initially, I thought it was just a harmless security measure, especially during a hiring campaign by a rival company. But the requests escalated. I was asked to create fake social media profiles to monitor staff activity, including photos of questionable behavior. Then came the most unsettling request, to make fake dating profiles and report on employees who might be using them. When compensation reviews came up, I documented everything I had done, every assignment, every instruction. Within a week, I was offered a surprisingly generous severance and asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement. I declined. Unknown to them, I had been saving everything to an external hard drive each month, every sensitive email, every file. That company was hiding more than anyone realized. Story 7. While working at a computer repair shop, I came across some truly unsettling content. One day, a school counselor from a local private school brought in his machine. He warned us, "There's some weird stuff on there," and he wasn't wrong. As I prepared to install antivirus software, I noticed his browser's bookmarks, a collection of extremely niche and intense adult websites. Nothing illegal, but certainly alarming. Another machine I worked on belonged to someone with over 20 gigabytes of disturbing fictional stories. No images, just unsettling writing. And then there was a customer who had set his screensaver to rotate through personal photos, family portraits, landscapes, and suddenly, deeply inappropriate images. I never reported any of it, but those experiences have stuck with me. It's strange what people leave behind on their devices, and even stranger what they assume no one will ever see. Story 8. One of my cousins, who I always thought was just that, a cousin, is likely my half-brother. Our fathers are brothers, and our mothers are sisters. Looking at us, the resemblance is striking. The first clue came when my uncle passed away. He left behind a letter that only my grandmother was allowed to read. In that letter, he revealed the truth. My grandmother told my mom, who's good at keeping secrets, mostly, but she also keeps a diary. Around holidays, I had a habit of quietly reading it to see what gifts I might be getting. That's how I found out the truth. My cousin isn't just family, he's more than that. We share more than a last name. We share blood. Story 9. For about a year, no one in our department was being paid for a specific lunch hour each week, the day we supervised students during off-campus activities. It meant we worked an extra hour without compensation. At the end of the year, I reviewed my pay stubs and noticed the discrepancy. I encouraged everyone to submit vouchers for the unpaid time, roughly $400 each. As expected, the vouchers were denied. But the very next week, the district suddenly scheduled official lunch breaks during that time. It was clear they knew we had a valid concern. Later, I contacted HR about something unrelated and received a rude response. Strangely, the HR rep included a message admitting they had been specifically told to deny our vouchers. I still have that email. I haven't filed a complaint yet, but if I did, I'm confident someone would lose their job. Story 10. My brother and his ex broke up for a few months before she asked for another chance. Not long after that, she told him she was pregnant. They were both 19, and while the timeline didn't quite add up, my brother believed he was the father. The rest of us had doubts. Her ultrasound showed a more advanced stage of pregnancy than possible. We tried to gently raise our concerns, but he wouldn't hear it. So we supported him. My mom even bought baby items, which the girlfriend kept. Then, a month later, she told him she was having an abortion. He was heartbroken and begged her to carry the baby and let him raise it. She refused and ended things again. To make matters worse, she told friends that he left her after a miscarriage. A complete fabrication. She even demanded he help cover the abortion costs before she'd return the baby items. We told him to let it go, and he did. He's now in a stable, happy relationship. But that experience left a scar on all of us. Story 11. I grew up never knowing my father. As an adult, I tracked him down and discovered he was living in another country. Over time, we reconnected, and I even visited him a few times. He was a fascinating man, full of stories, charm, and mystery. But he made it clear he had no intention of returning to the U.S. One night, after too many drinks, he shared a chilling memory. Decades earlier, he and his brother had been at a bar when a fight broke out. Someone didn't make it out alive. My father fled the country. His brother, who had been drinking heavily at the time, left the state and gave up drinking altogether. The next morning, my dad acted like the conversation never happened. I've never told anyone. There's no statute of limitations on murder, and though it wasn't a legal confession, I know where it happened, when it happened, and who was involved. I grew up fatherless. I sometimes wonder if another child also did because of mine. Story 12. Years ago, my mother opened her home and heart to a woman in need. She had children, was struggling financially, and my mom wanted to help. In return, this woman stole from us not just money, but our birth certificates, identity documents, my mother's engagement ring, wedding band, and a treasured ruby heirloom watch. We live in a small area, and she can't relocate easily. So, I've made it my mission to track where she works. Every time she gets a new job, I contact her employer and disclose her full criminal history. I've been the reason she's lost 4 jobs. I know it's not the most graceful way of handling things, but I'm fiercely loyal, and I don't forgive thieves. I believe people can change, but only if they show remorse. She never has, so I'll keep making life harder for her. Not out of cruelty, but because she wronged someone I love. And I won't forget that. Story 13. Several years ago, I was hired by a wealthy, well-respected married man to repair his computer. When I opened the laptop, I was shocked to see explicit emails on the screen. Messages between him and a young male escort detailing their encounters. He stood silently beside me, clearly realizing I had seen everything. I calmly closed the emails and proceeded with the repair. We never spoke of it again. Since that day, he's continued to hire me whenever he needs tech help, and he always pays more than my standard rate, sometimes double. I've never mentioned the emails, and I never will, but I think he understands that I could. He values discretion, and I respect that. I don't consider it blackmail. I simply fixed a computer and chose silence over scandal. Story 14. The day after my 15th birthday, my father died in a tragic accident. He fell from a roof while working at a construction site. The grief that followed was overwhelming. For me, my stepmother, my stepsisters, and everyone in our extended family. 2 weeks later, my stepmother told me she was pregnant. I was stunned. My dad had a vasectomy 2 years earlier. When I asked whose baby it was, she was visibly shaken. My mother had already warned me. She'd seen my stepmom with my dad's brother late at night, more than once. The baby became a miracle child. Everyone knew the timeline didn't make sense, but no one questioned it. She even sued the property owner for compensation, claiming they were legally married. They weren't. I eventually exposed everything with the help of my mom and uncle, who admitted the baby was his. The fallout was massive. I lost nearly everyone from that side of the family. They saw me as the villain. But I know the truth, and I believe it always finds its way to the surface, no matter how carefully buried. Story 15. When I was 18 or 19, I got involved with a woman in her 30s who was in the middle of a divorce. She was confident, attractive, and the physical chemistry between us was undeniable. We spent several months seeing each other, though her soon-to-be ex was sometimes back in the picture. Eventually, she told me she was pregnant. She claimed it was her husband's, and he seemed to believe her. They stayed together. From her social media, it looks like they've built a stable life. Good jobs, a nice home, and 2 daughters. But sometimes I wonder. I've never stepped in. I don't want to disrupt a child's life or destabilize a family. They're doing well, and I'm not in a place to offer more. I've told myself that letting go was the right thing, even if a part of me wishes I could have known the child who might be mine. Story 16. At work, 2 people, a supervisor and an assistant, had a secret relationship that lasted over a year. I found out by accident after my birthday party. I knew they hadn't been careful, especially since protection wasn't used. Not long after the affair ended, the woman married a successful lawyer. They bought a £1 million home, and he put down a massive deposit. A month after moving in, she discovered she was pregnant. She insisted it was her husband's child. Here's where it gets wild. The man she had the affair with? Her husband later offered him a job as his apprentice. To this day, I've never told anyone. But every time I see them, I think about the secret they're all living with and how close it is to unraveling. Story 17. My girlfriend and I share a house with another couple who are expecting a baby soon. About 8 months ago, the soon-to-be mother had a party with some old friends, including 2 men who had a rough edge. One of them had been her close friend for years. Later that night, my girlfriend went to ask her something and found one of the guys alone. The other 2 were in her bedroom. From the noises coming from behind the door, it was clear they weren't just talking. A few days later, the boyfriend, our housemate, caught her kissing the same friend in the kitchen and kicked both men out. He never found out what my girlfriend overheard. He's now excited about becoming a father. But deep down, we're almost certain the baby isn't his. Story 18. There's a man I know who serves as an associate pastor at a very strict church. He's engaged to the senior pastor's daughter and is deeply involved in ministry. But I also know his ex-girlfriend, a friend of my wife, who shared details about their past. Apparently, their relationship quickly escalated into extremely intimate territory. At one point, he even convinced her to bring a third person into the picture. She later said she mostly felt like an observer, uncomfortable and unsure. He preaches strict morality now, but if his past came to light, it would devastate his career, his engagement, and his congregation's trust. I've never said anything, but his double life is one of the most glaring I've ever seen. Story 19. My older brother's best friends are twins. A few years ago, one of the twins got drunk and confided in me. He had once walked in on his brother in a compromising situation with another male friend, something he never brought up again. The twin in question now dates a beautiful woman who comes from a well-known local family. It seems more about appearances than affection. Meanwhile, the brother who told me this story travels to Thailand every year, supposedly for tattoos. The woman he's dating once messaged me late at night, asking me out. I ignored her, but I suspect she was serious. The whole situation feels like layers of secrets stacked on top of each other, all waiting to fall. Story 20. A friend of mine spent over a year collecting unemployment benefits while attending college. The catch? He had no intention of finding work. He'd apply for jobs he knew he wouldn't get, high-level roles far beyond his experience, just to show proof of effort. He constantly criticized people who relied on government aid, calling them lazy and irresponsible. The irony? He was gaming the system while judging others for doing the same. Now, he's in the military and works a government job. If his past were exposed, he could face dishonorable discharge and lose everything. I've never said a word, but it's hard to forget the hypocrisy. Story 21. Back in school, there was a guy trying desperately to be seen as the cool kid. His parents were wealthy and funded his every passing interest. One week he was a fashion blogger, the next a photographer, then a vegan activist. Despite this, he didn't have many real friends. I was probably the closest thing he had, mostly because he paid me to do his assignments. He paid well, 3 hours worth of minimum wage for work that took me 15 minutes. I did everything, even taught him enough to sound competent. Eventually, it was time for a major test. He convinced me to show up in his place. I walked in, sat down, and was promptly sent home. He failed the test again, but here's the twist. His parents thought my academic record was his. They rewarded him with a brand new apartment and a shiny Audi. He flaunted that car like a badge of honor, but he treated it terribly. Before long, it was in worse shape than a 15-year-old vehicle. His big business idea with a friend flopped. Now, the friend owns the apartment and he pays rent using allowance money. The car? Sold for a fraction of its cost and wasted on fleeting indulgences. His parents still believe he's living the dream. They'll find out eventually, and it won't be pretty. Story 22. A former acquaintance once shared something that shook me to my core. As a child, he had been left alone frequently with a family member, and over time, he said their interactions turned deeply inappropriate. When their parents found out, they treated it like a misunderstanding. No therapy, no authorities, just a plea to not do it again. The other child involved suffered emotionally and psychologically. She became withdrawn, struggled with addiction, and eventually was cut off from the family for destructive behavior. He never seemed to grasp the extent of what he'd done. I couldn't understand how the family ignored it, how they allowed them to be alone again after knowing what had happened. That conversation changed me. Evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it looks like your neighbor, your classmate, or someone you once trusted. Story 23. There's a woman I used to be close with, the wife of a friend I've known for years. Before they got married, he messaged her best friend trying to start something romantic. The friend shut it down but forwarded the messages to me. I still have them tucked away. I've never confronted him. He doesn't know I know. Ironically, she also has her own history. Before they were together, she had a relationship with a married man, someone I had worked with for years. When she ended it, she threatened to tell his wife. Days later, he took his own life. If the truth about either of them came out, their marriage could crumble. But I've stayed quiet, holding on to the evidence. One betrayal balanced against another. A secret stalemate. Story 24. During university, I lived with 3 girls. It seemed like a good idea at the time. It wasn't. One of them, Gemma, had a boyfriend named Ben. Her brother, Stuart, was staying with us temporarily. One night, Gemma came home after a night out. Later, I heard unmistakable sounds coming from her room. Not unusual in a shared house. But when I realized Ben hadn't been over that night, and that the only other male in the house was her brother, a terrible thought took root. I could be wrong. Maybe there was someone else I didn't see. Maybe it was a one-time mistake. But that night, and the silence around it, still lingers in my mind. Story 25. When I was a teenager, I dated a girl who often babysat for a young single mother in her apartment building. The woman was pleasant, respectful, and seemed like a dedicated parent. Most nights, she'd return home around 3 or 4 a.m., often after dates. One night, while we were saving a file on her computer, we couldn't find where it had gone. We opened a photo folder, thinking it might be there. What we found instead was a series of highly inappropriate images, not illegal but certainly shocking. They appeared to be from a private event in a public place. From that moment on, I couldn't look at her the same. She still smiled politely when we crossed paths, but I knew something I was never meant to see. Story 26. My ex and I dated during 2 semesters of college. She had a wild streak and I was open-minded. It worked for a while. Eventually, we broke up, and she started dating my former roommate, someone who had always liked her. Years passed. We lost touch. During that time, I began my transition. She used to joke that I'd end up a woman someday, and she was right. A few years ago, she reached out again. She began venting about her current relationship, saying she felt trapped, unfulfilled, emotionally stifled. Her fiancé, my old roommate, is deeply traditional. She says he won't budge on certain things. Sometimes she reminisces about our past and wonders what might have been. I never encourage anything inappropriate. But if he knew some of the things she said, I doubt their engagement would survive. Story 27. This story dates back to the 1960s and still haunts me. My aunt's father was a kind, generous man, a war veteran and a devoted dad. When his oldest son suddenly lost his sight before puberty, the family became desperate. Doctors couldn't determine the cause. In their panic, the parents agreed to an extreme medical suggestion, hoping it would reverse the blindness. Didn't. Instead, it affected his development permanently. He never matured physically or emotionally, and remained dependent on his parents his entire life. They acted out of love, but made a choice that altered his path forever. It's a heartbreaking reminder that desperation can lead people to decisions with irreversible consequences. Story 28. My immediate supervisor, and is in a relationship with our department manager, John. Here's how I figured it out, and often talks to my wife, who also works in our department. One day and mentioned her boyfriend, a manager who earned a good salary, but didn't say where he worked. Later, while out of town for training, and secretly rushed her boyfriend into her hotel room. My wife saw it all. The next day, I casually asked around and learned that John was on sick leave that week. I connected the dots. When my wife mentioned she knew who his boyfriend was, and panicked and begged her not to tell anyone. I haven't. And makes work difficult for me, always assigning me the grunt work. If I ever decide to report it, their careers could be in serious jeopardy. Story 29. My roommate had a toxic ex who kept reappearing whenever she needed money, a car, or a place to stay. She manipulated him, made promises, and left him worse off each time. I once told her to stop, that he was struggling and didn't need more pain. She told him I was jealous and secretly in love with her, which wasn't true. She insisted they keep their relationship a secret when I was around. Then, out of nowhere, my friend asked me if I'd ever consider ending my life if I had a serious illness. 2 days later, he took his own life. Weeks after the funeral, I learned she had exposed him to a serious condition he hadn't known about. She never told him, and just weeks later, she was dating one of his friends. I've never told anyone. The weight of it still sits with me. Story 30. My ex-girlfriend is in a relationship with a much older man who provides for her and her daughters. They take vacations, live in a nice home, and from the outside, it looks like a dream. But privately, she messages me, saying she's uncomfortable around him and still in love with me. She claims she's doing it all for her daughters, that he gives them stability. But she's also still technically married to someone else, and neither her husband nor the children's father knows the full truth. She's told the kids to lie about where they live. We've reconnected a few times, but I stay emotionally distant. Her choices are complicated, but one day they may come crashing down. And if they do, I won't be the one pulling the thread, but I won't be surprised when it all unravels. Story 31. There's a guy at my college who transferred in from another school. At first, I assumed he might be gay, not because of any stereotypes, but because of how he carried himself. His mannerisms, speech, and the way he dressed stood out. His jeans, for instance, always seemed deliberately attention-grabbing. But he was also extremely religious, vocally so, and often expressed traditional views that didn't align with someone living openly. I asked around and learned he was raised by a single mother. I figured that might explain his expressiveness and dropped the suspicion. Then things started getting odd. He began following guys into bathrooms, overstaying his welcome in dorm rooms, and being disruptive. Eventually, our group distanced ourselves from him. Later, someone who had attended his previous school told me that he had come out there, but after facing ridicule, transferred and began acting extremely conservative, even homophobic. Now, he hides who he is while tearing others down. His new group of friends has no idea about his past. It's difficult to watch someone deny themselves so completely and project that pain outward. Story 32. Today, I learned something about my younger brother that left me quietly emotional. He's one of my twin half-brothers. There's a 9-year age gap between us. His twin casually mentioned that he had come out to their mother recently. I was surprised, but only because I hadn't known. I asked my stepmom and she confirmed it. I instantly thought back to all the times I teased him growing up, never cruelly, but in that older brother way that I thought was harmless. Now, I realize those jokes may have made his journey harder. Our father doesn't know, and that's the real concern. He's strongly opinionated and has made his views on these matters painfully clear. The twins still live at home, and I worry what could happen if the truth comes out. I support my brother 100%, but I also feel a quiet guilt that I wasn't more aware, or more kind, when it could have mattered. Story 33. I work with a man who has been arrogant and dismissive for as long as I've known him. We grew up on the same street, went to the same school, and crossed paths more than once before ending up at the same workplace. In 7th grade, something happened that few people remember, but I do. He got caught doing something highly inappropriate in the school locker room. The embarrassment was too much for him. He climbed the baseball field fence, tied a sweatshirt to a post, and tried to end his life. Thankfully, the attempt failed. He was suspended, went to therapy, and disappeared from school for a while. Now he walks around acting like he's better than everyone, as though nothing ever happened. If he ever decides to target me like he has others, I have that memory stored away. I'm not proud of it, but I know how damaging it could be if exposed. Story 34. During college, I did something that I now regret, but also don't. I installed a keylogger on my roommate's computer. At the time, it was a dumb prank, a way to spy for fun. But what I found wasn't funny at all. There were chat logs, long, detailed messages where he described fantasies involving minors. His search history showed he frequented platforms designed for very young users. There were no illegal images, but the intent was clear. I reported everything to the police and handed over a flash drive with the data. Months later, I got a brief follow-up, and then nothing. I told one of our former roommates, but instead of offering support, he was furious about the keylogger. He told everyone what I'd done, leaving out the reason. I lost all my college friends, but I'd do it again. Some things are too serious to ignore, even if it costs you everything. Story 35. There's a woman my wife once became close with during a difficult time in our marriage. She was married too, deeply involved in her church, and studying to become a counselor. At first, I thought she was simply being supportive. But over time, she encouraged my wife to keep secrets, and eventually proposed a polyamorous relationship. I was hesitant but afraid to lose my family. I agreed, hoping things would settle. Eventually, my wife realized it wasn't what she wanted and ended the arrangement. That's when the woman turned vindictive. She began spreading rumors that I was controlling and emotionally abusive. She even told my wife they should raise my son together. Thankfully, my marriage survived, and we're stronger now. But I kept every message and recorded every conversation. If she ever tries to interfere again, whether at church or in her future counseling career, I won't hesitate to reveal the truth. Story 36. About a year into dating my ex-girlfriend, she was diagnosed with a lifelong medical condition, herpes. I didn't leave her when she told me. I cared about her and saw it as something we'd face together. But over time, the relationship became unhealthy. She tried to make me jealous, played mind games, and became emotionally distant. I eventually left. Later, she tried to blame me for her diagnosis, even though I had been tested multiple times, all negative. When I told her, she seemed disappointed, as if she wanted me to share the burden. Soon after, she started dating someone new. I've never told him, though I sometimes wonder if he knows. It's not my place, but it's hard to forget. Story 37. My cousin has political ambitions. He's run for state senate twice and plans to run again soon. He's also a traveling preacher for a conservative branch of Christianity. He believes women shouldn't have voting rights and has preached that wearing bows in your hair is sinful. I'm a person of faith too, but we see the world very differently. He's 35, but styles himself to look older, trying to embody the classic preacher aesthetic. Family gatherings are uncomfortable, especially knowing what he really believes. If I ever went public with the things he said, and I've got recordings, his political and religious careers would be over. I haven't yet. Story 38. My brother has struggled with substance use for years. I was even his legal guardian while he awaited trial for a complex legal case. Eventually, he took a plea deal and avoided prison, but only under strict conditions. I once shared a personal trauma with him, something I had never told anyone. Instead of respecting that trust, he told his girlfriend. She told others. Before I knew it, people I didn't even know were whispering about something deeply personal. He's since broken the terms of his probation multiple times, using drugs, drinking, and traveling without permission. I could report him. He'd go straight to jail. But I haven't, only because our family begs me not to. That's the only reason. Forgiveness isn't part of this story. Story 39. At work, we have a policy. If you leave after 8 p.m., you can bill a taxi ride home to the company. Each month, we submit a spreadsheet showing the rides, times, and client codes. One senior lawyer always seems to submit rides timestamped just after 8 o'clock, like 8:04 or 8:06. But I've seen her leave at 7:30 and still claim the cab costs. It's too precise to be a coincidence. So far, I haven't reported it. But if she ever tries to throw someone under the bus or act like she's above reproach, I'll expose everything. It's an open secret, and one day, it'll cost her. Story 40. My wife's younger siblings, a brother and sister, were involved in something deeply disturbing as teenagers. When their parents found out, they tried to remove the son from the home. But shortly after, they discovered the daughter had been involved with other individuals, including older men. Instead of going to the authorities, the parents stayed silent, afraid that their daughter would expose what happened with her brother. They're devoutly religious and couldn't bear the public shame. Now, everything remains frozen. No justice, no healing, just silence. Everyone knows, but no one acts. And in a small community like ours, that silence is its own kind of violence. Story 41. I help manage the financial records for a small business owned by my father-in-law. One day, while reviewing receipts and expenses, I noticed a recurring payment listed under wellness services. It didn't make sense. The amount was too high and too frequent for a basic massage. I dug deeper and realized the payments were directed to the same massage therapist my mother-in-law sees. That raised a flag. My wife and I talked about it, and she admitted she had once seen a suspicious message pop up on his phone. A reminder for an appointment, but not with his own name. We both suspect he's having an affair, using the wellness sessions as a cover. Her mother, deeply trusting and devoted, has no idea. We've kept quiet, hoping he'll end it on his own. But it's hard watching someone you care about live in a bubble you know could burst at any moment. Story 42. At my last job, one of my tasks was to monitor employee internet activity. It was mostly routine, checking for unauthorized downloads or inappropriate use of company time. But one employee stood out. He was clearly watching videos and chatting during work hours. I flagged it and moved on. Then, while reviewing logs from another employee's workstation, I noticed something stranger. Two married coworkers, from different departments, were sending each other intimate messages. Nothing explicit, but the tone was unmistakable. One of them had a child on the way. The most concerning case involved someone whose searches suggested a serious health condition. I never said anything. Who am I to interfere in someone's personal life? But I've never forgotten how much people reveal, even when they think no one is watching. Story 43. A guy I went to college with recently reconnected with me over social media. We were never close, but we had mutual friends. A few months ago, he began sending me messages, casual at first, then gradually more suggestive. My partner and I found it funny at first, even reading them aloud together. Then we discovered he was in a committed relationship. Photos of his girlfriend filled his profile, vacations, anniversary posts, matching outfits. That's when the messages stopped being funny. I never replied to his last one. He still posts about honesty and loyalty. I've never told his girlfriend, but sometimes I wonder if she deserves to know the truth. Story 44. When I was 13, I overheard a conversation between two girls in my class that I didn't fully understand at the time. They were talking about a man who gave them money in exchange for spending time with him. They giggled, saying he wasn't creepy, and bought them things. Years later, I realized what they were describing. It wasn't innocent. It wasn't harmless. They were being manipulated by an adult who knew exactly what he was doing. I've often wondered what became of them, whether they ever recognized the danger they had been in, or if they carried that experience with them in silence. I never told anyone. I just listened, confused, and walked away. But I remember their voices, and the way they laughed as if it was all a game. Story 45. My wife has a close friend who's been married for several years. Her husband cheated once in the past, but she forgave him after a long period of counseling and rebuilding trust. Things seemed to be going well until recently. While browsing a dating app just for fun, my wife stumbled across his profile. It was active, updated, and included recent photos. He had changed his name slightly, but not enough to hide who he was. My wife debated whether to tell her friend. In the end, she chose not to. She believes the truth will come out eventually, that people like him always get caught. But keeping that secret eats at her. She wants to protect her friend but doesn't want to break her heart a second time. Story 46. While serving in the National Guard, I dated a woman from my hometown. She was attractive, confident, and very open about her past. One day, she admitted that she had once been involved with her superior officer, a married man, while they were both stationed at the same base. She said it ended badly. He was afraid of being dishonorably discharged, and she felt used. But she never reported it, and neither did he. They quietly went separate ways. I didn't know how to respond. It wasn't my business, but I couldn't look at her the same afterward. Eventually, we drifted apart. She has since moved on, and so have I. But that story, and the way she told it without remorse, has stayed with me. Story 47. When I was 15, I walked into the house unexpectedly and overheard my aunt and mother whispering in the kitchen. They were talking about the boy again, a child no one else in the family ever mentioned. I stood quietly just outside the doorway, listening. What I pieced together chilled me. My uncle had cheated on my aunt in his early 20s with a woman he worked with. She became pregnant, and after pressure from both families, she gave the child up for adoption. No one else knew. My aunt forgave him on the condition that the child would never be acknowledged, never be part of their lives. Now, nearly 3 decades later, that child, now a grown man, has sent a letter to their home. He found them through a DNA test. My cousin, their only official child, has no idea he has a half-brother. My aunt's marriage has always seemed solid, but I know she's terrified of the past catching up. One letter could destroy everything she spent her life protecting. Story 48. He graduated top of his class, received a prestigious scholarship, and now works as a senior developer for a Fortune 500 company. He's admired in our alumni circles, invited to speak at conferences, and even mentors young professionals. But I know something that could end all of that in a heartbeat. During our final semester, he paid me, and a few others, to take his exams. He used a VPN to submit assignments from multiple IP addresses and had someone impersonate him during online tests. I still have the chat logs and payment confirmations. Back then, I thought it was harmless. He was overwhelmed and I needed money. But watching him climb so high while others, who worked honestly, struggled to get interviews, it started to eat at me. He's built an empire on a lie. One email with attachments could make it all collapse. Story 49. A close friend of mine recently took one of those consumer DNA tests, excited to learn more about her ancestry. We joked about what she might discover. Maybe a royal bloodline, maybe a long-lost cousin. But when she shared her results with me, I immediately noticed something was missing. Her father's side, the lineage she was most proud of, wasn't there. No markers matched his ethnic background. She thought it was a mistake. I knew better. Her mother had told me the truth years ago, during a particularly emotional night after too much wine. Her daughter wasn't her husband's. She was the result of a brief affair with a man from another country. The mother begged me never to tell. She believed the truth would destroy her marriage and her daughter's sense of self. I've kept the secret all this time, but now, the daughter's curiosity is leading her closer to the truth. All it would take is one more test or one more slip and everything would unravel. Story 50. I was helping a friend move when I found a worn leather-bound journal tucked behind a box of old books. I picked it up without thinking and flipped it open, expecting old poems or doodles. Instead, I found something I wish I'd never read. Page after page, she described intrusive thoughts, violent, unsettling, and deeply personal. Some entries mentioned her toddler son. She never harmed him, but the intensity of her fears and fantasies was disturbing. She used the journal as a place to purge the darkest parts of her mind, things she couldn't say aloud. She's a devoted mother in public, patient, kind, always smiling. No one would suspect what she's battled internally. I never confronted her. Maybe it was just writing, a way to cope. But if anyone else ever found that journal, a partner, a grandparent, a caseworker, it could lead to consequences she might never recover from. Story 51. He's known for a song that played on nearly every radio station for a year straight. It became a wedding favorite, a graduation anthem, an emotional ballad people still quote online. He's built a career on that song, tours, interviews, even a record deal. But the lyrics weren't his. I know this because the real author was someone I once loved. She wrote it during a summer spent at a lakeside cabin, scribbling verses on napkins and guitar tabs. She died in a car accident before she could release any of her music. They had been seeing each other quietly. After her funeral, he took her notebook. I was with her during those long evenings when those lyrics came to life. I have recordings, drafts, even a video of her performing it. He knows I know. He sends me signed merchandise and never speaks of her. If I ever came forward, he'd lose everything. But I stay silent for her. Story 52. She told everyone she worked her way through medical school by holding down 2 jobs. She gave motivational talks about perseverance and sacrifice. Her patients admire her. Her colleagues call her a rising star. But I know the truth. She was supported entirely by a married professor. He paid her tuition, rent, and expenses in exchange for something more than tutoring. I knew because I worked at the bar where they often met. She once forgot her wallet and I had to run after her. The man she was with wasn't her uncle. He's still teaching. She's still practicing. Neither of their spouses knows. If the story ever reached the wrong ears, their careers and reputations would be gone by morning. Story 53. He was found in the garage, slumped behind the wheel of his car, a note folded neatly on the passenger seat. The coroner ruled it suicide. The funeral was quiet, heavy with grief, but I know that scene was staged. When I arrived at the house that morning, his brother was already there. He told me not to call anyone yet. He had panicked after finding him and rearranged things to make it look clean. I didn't ask why. I didn't press. But later, I overheard a voicemail that hinted at something darker. A confrontation the night before, a struggle, a fall. The official story is that he took his own life. But in truth, no one knows exactly what happened. And if the authorities did, the family would never recover. Story 54. Our pastor is charismatic, eloquent, and beloved by the entire congregation. He leads marriage retreats and speaks out against immorality. But I know that 2 decades ago he served 3 years in prison for aggravated assault. He moved states, changed his name, and reinvented himself. I found out by accident while helping him set up a new computer. An old email account was linked to an archived newspaper article. I clicked it before I realized what I was seeing. I've never said anything. He's done good work and people rely on him. But if the church board, or worse, the media, discovered his past, everything he's built would be dismantled in an instant. Story 55. My neighbor inherited a beautiful home after her elderly client passed away. She claimed the woman had named her in the will out of gratitude for years of companionship. The children didn't contest it. They assumed their mother had her reasons. But I know that's not what happened. I used to work at the law office that handled the estate. I saw the original will, the one that gave everything to the woman's children. It disappeared mysteriously days before the final version was filed. She forged it, or had someone do it for her. I never said a word. But every time I see her gardening in that yard, smiling and waving, I remember the look on those children's faces at the reading of the will. Confused, hurt, and betrayed. Story 56. Before my grandmother died, she asked me to sit with her for a few minutes alone. She handed me a small envelope and said, "Don't open it until I'm gone." After the funeral, I read it. Inside was a letter explaining that my uncle, the youngest of her children, wasn't my grandfather's son. He had no idea, and neither did anyone else. The man she had the affair with was a traveling salesman who passed through town once a year. She never saw him again but always knew my uncle wasn't her husband's child. He looks up to the man who raised him as a hero. If he ever discovered the truth, it would shatter everything he believes about his childhood. Sometimes I wonder if the letter was meant to clear her conscience or pass the burden to me. Either way, I've never shared it. But carrying it hasn't been easy.